I got to tell you,
Yeah.
we handle so many sexual harassment cases. I mean, people just, they're horny and it's a problem. That's, I don't know how else to say it.
That's going to be into the trailer for this episode. Hi, Francesca.
Well, hello, Mel.
It's Eclipse Day.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
I'll tell you, I'm feeling pretty good. You know, they talk about how everything's going to be completely crazy on Eclipse Day and your emotions will be high. I think I had that on Friday of last week. I think I'm like 2 days ahead of the astrological calendar for some reason. Yeah. How about you?
Oh, that's good. I'm feeling pretty calm for Eclipse Day. I was expecting chaos, but I've got calm, so I'll take it.
I'll say
Nothing.
calm all day, every day, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
friends, this is your work friends. I'm Mel,
Hey, and I am Francesca.
and we're your two HR friends with no filter, getting you through the work shit. Today, we want to introduce this fantastic episode, Lawyering Up Essentials of Employment Law with Ryan Stygar. You might recognize him from TikTok or Instagram as the labor lawyer. And he joined us to emphasize his fight for workers' rights. Francesca, what do you think about this?
This episode was equal parts eye-opening and just freaking hilarious. Ryan walked us through what you should be doing as an employee to protect yourself. What are some really typical cases that he sees? And also, if you ever do need to lawyer up, how do you make sure you are in a great situation? We went into some nooks and crannies of cases, which were just freaking hilarious. So I thoroughly enjoyed talking with Ryan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same. There's a red thread throughout the episode, Ryan's personal story, which was a great tale about perseverance and self-worth. There's a really important message that anyone who listens to this will leave with. Here it is, our conversation with Ryan Steiger. Well, friends, we have with us today Ryan Stygar. You might recognize him as the labor lawyer on a lot of social media channels like Instagram and TikTok. He's an employment lawyer who really cares about people and employee rights. He comes from Centurion Trial Attorneys. He's a podcaster too. He has a podcast called The Working Class. We highly recommend that you check that out to hear some of his great stories. And we'd like to say, Ryan, what really drew us to you as a guest for our podcast is that ultimately we see you as an educator and a protector of employees. And so we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And what a flattering description. That's the way I think we all try to be, whether you're a workers' rights attorney like myself or one of the noble ethical HR reps that are out there just trying to do the right thing. Ultimately, our business is just trying to protect people. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Would love to hear your backstory. I know you've shared it online, but for some of
Mhm.
our listeners who might not know or might not have seen you, what was your journey to becoming an employment attorney?
Okay, well, it's an unusual story, and I hope it provides some comfort to anyone listening who thinks that they're on the wrong path. Maybe they're too old or they're afraid of making a change. It's never too late, and things are never, you never make a mistake that can't be fixed. So, my journey started really in my early 20s. I had dropped out of college at UC Santa Barbara,
Mm.
and the reason I had dropped out was I had gone to college reluctantly in the first place. I didn't want to go to college. Being a lawyer was not on my radar. All I ever wanted to be, Mel, was a firefighter. That was the only thing I
Oh,
ever cared about was being a firefighter. And I was so obsessed with it that I was truly convinced that until I became a firefighter, my life just didn't matter. I was willing to sacrifice everything to get there. So I dropped out of UCSB. Fun fact, when you drop out of a school, you're supposed to like tell someone that you're leaving. There's like
might be
some
nice.
yeah, I
Yeah.
guess there's some
You don't keep getting
paperwork
bills.
involved that you should
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't do that. I just left.
You like Irish
So-
goodbye to
Just,
your
yeah.
undergrad?
oh yeah. Yeah.
Funny.
And so here's the consequence of that. And it didn't bite me in the butt till about 4.5 years later. I got straight F's that quarter because I
Ooh.
just
Oh,
didn't show up.
no.
Well, funny thing about final exams is if you don't show up, you tend to fail.
Yeah.
I was an idiot. when I was 20 years old.
Everybody's an
Who
idiot.
isn't?
Everybody
Who
is an
isn't?
idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. So put a pin in that. That came to bite me later. But so what had happened was that last semester before I had dropped out, I had checked out entirely. One of the cruel ironies of living in Santa Barbara at the time was my apartment was right across the street from Santa Barbara County Fire Station 11. So every day I would see those big, they're blue and white in Santa Barbara. They're not red. Those blue and white trucks coming in and out. I thought, man, that's got to be me. I'm wasting time in college. What am I doing here? I'm wasting my life. I'm 20 years old. I'm running out of time. You always think you're so much older than you really are. So I'd started taking fire science courses online. I wasn't even paying attention to my classes. And then I dropped out, got into an accelerated EMT program, got my EMT license, started volunteering with the San Diego County Fire Authority and as a reservist with the Valley Center Fire Protection District. I worked on an ambulance. I went to multiple trainings in fire academies, got hired with CAL FIRE, and that was a 4.5 year journey. Really, all that firefighting work between the reserve stations, the volunteer assignments, the wildland assignments, everything. And then 2014 was when I left. So about 10 years ago is when I left the fire service, because sometime around year 3 of being a full-time like firefighter, that was how I made my money. I realized I wasn't happy anymore. I had done really well in the fire service. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed my work. I do miss it. I miss it dearly, and I think about it every day. I really do. But I got into a bad station. And it was the first station I went to where I was surrounded by bitter, angry, unhappy firefighters. People who were there for the check and didn't care about firefighting. A lot of them were divorced. A lot of them were single and bitter about it. And then I was the new guy at the station, so some of them took it out on me. It was my first experience with a truly toxic hostile work environment. And it highlighted all the worst parts of firefighting, the hard work, the early mornings, the time away from family. And it really minimized the good parts, the brotherhood, the service to community, the love of taking care of people. It just wasn't there. So while that was happening, I remember I went to this fire. I was walking up this hill with this captain. Captain was maybe 10 years, 15 years older than me. He wasn't that much older than me, but far ahead enough that I could see myself in him. We're hiking up this hill at a fire. The whole hike, Mel, all he did was complain about his bitch ex-wife. I'm doing air quotes right here. His
Oh,
bitch
geez. Sounds
ex-wife.
lovely.
Oh, yeah, real happy fella. And he was just complaining about her. By the way, it was his second. He already screwed up one marriage, and then he was on his way. It's just a mess. He's talking about how his kids don't appreciate him. They don't call, and he pays this child support, and he just couldn't wait to retire. Oh my God, he was the most miserable man ever. And he complained for maybe 6 hours. I'm hiking up this hill on a 100-degree day. There's fire, and all this guy's doing is complaining about how miserable he is. And I remember just looking at him and thinking, all right, I already started having some doubts, because with fire, geographically you're limited. You can't move around a lot. It's really one job. You can do different things in the fire service, but I was just going to stay in the fire service. There wasn't as much variety. Then I had a bad station with bad dudes. I didn't have the brotherhood. I didn't have the friendship I was used to. There wasn't this joy of going and serving our community at that station. And then I'm sitting here looking at what I felt like was a glimpse into my future if I didn't make a change. And if you ever saw or read A Christmas Carol, The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, it felt kind of like that. And oh my God. And I remember I got to the station and I was just like, I got to make a change. I got to leave. I'm not going to be like that captain. I'm unhappy. I'm going to make a change. And I remember thinking I was so old. I was 24 and I was like, I've ruined my life. I got one more shot at this. So I left. I finished my undergraduate degree. I did that in about a year because I already had a bunch of credits, notwithstanding the failed semester. Now, that did bite me. When I went back, I was on academic probation because I was an at-risk student, because I had failed so many classes, and I really had to work hard to bring my GPA up. But the dent in my GPA had consequences. I finished my undergrad. I applied to 13 law schools. I got into 0. I suspect that being on an academic probation and having that dent in my GPA probably did not help. When that happened, I spiraled into just depression, a mess. Got an office job for a few months. One of my friends got me in there. I didn't do well in that office job. I really struggled with my self-esteem because I thought, wow, I'm making less than I did as a firefighter. It's less fulfilling. I sit in this office all day. I accumulated all this student debt finishing my degree, and no law school will look at me. I didn't feel like much of a winner. Things got dark for a while. I left that office job. I was trying to get into law schools. Nothing was working out. I took a landscaping job and I started driving for Uber to try to make ends meet. And then it wasn't until I was 27, maybe 3 years after I'd left the fire service, long detour, that one law school finally said yes.
Takes
Only one.
one.
Only
Takes
one law.
one.
To be clear, it's to anyone who looks at me and says, "Oh my gosh, Attorney Ryan, he's this famous lawyer. He owns a law firm. He's making all this money. Like he's just got it all figured out." Like I really took a long, winding tour to get here, and I bumped into a lot of dead ends. And really, at 27, which many people listening at 27 may be considering law school, maybe they're thinking it's too late for you. It's absolutely not. At 27, I had an old Toyota Camry. I just felt like the biggest loser. I had pushed my friends away because I was so unhappy. I was lonely. And finally, one law school said yes. And I went to law school. I did well in law school. It really felt right away. It was one of the first experiences I had where making friends was easy.
Yeah.
And that was my first sign that I was in the right place. Graduated, did very well in law school. I opened my practice, Centurion Trial Attorneys, right when I graduated, and the rest is history. Now we're 10 teammates strong at this practice. We fight for workers' rights every day. I put information out online to educate people about their rights. I only represent clients in California, but I try to make content for all 50 states because everyone
Yeah.
deserves to know about their rights at work. That's how I got here. And I want to really emphasize how messy my road was, how many low points there were, how the complete lack of a master plan.
Yeah.
There was no master plan. There was just a guy who realized he was unhappy, tried making changes, failed epically over and over again until finally the stars aligned. And was there some luck and some privilege involved? Absolutely. But what I share with people is you keep pushing. There's no guarantee things are going to work out. I wish there was, but there's not. We live in the real world. But if you quit, then it's guaranteed it's not going to work out. So
Yeah.
that's how I got here. And I know it was a long story, but I hope someone is listening who's going through something similar and says, you know what? Attorney Ryan looks like he's doing okay. Sounds like he went through something similar I went through. I'll just keep pushing. I hope that's what people take away.
I hope so too. I think it's
Yeah.
an excellent story and it's real. I think more people have an experience like yours than not, and it doesn't get discussed enough. Francesca and I talk about this all the time, how it's kind of bullshit that at 18 you're supposed to know what you want to do with your life and have it
Yeah.
all figured out, and it's unrealistic. And I appreciate the detour that you took us on because I think that's an important story to tell, you know? And I hope it
It's
inspires
tough.
others. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough going through that, especially being 18, 19, 20. Heck, even at 27, which is when I got into a law school and then started at 28. I think part of what made everything so hard figuring out what I wanted to do was I didn't know who I was. I knew things I liked doing, but I hadn't figured out fundamentally what is it that is important to me about my values, about my goals, about the things that I prioritize. When I was 19, 20 years old, all I knew was I liked big trucks, I liked adventure, I liked girls, and I liked money. That's all I knew,
It
And
sounds
then
about right at
I
that
was
age,
just,
right?
yeah, and I was just starting to form the very basics of a value system.
What would you say are the core values that led you to becoming specifically, there's a lot of different areas that you could have went into for practice.
Mhm.
What were the values that led you to employment law?
Empathy. Being a working class guy who had to work very hard for my money, and frankly, the money I made wasn't great. Understanding that the amount of money a person earns is not at all a reflection of their value as a human being. It's not a reflection of their intelligence, and it damn sure is not a reflection of how hard they work, because the
Right.
hardest working people you'll ever meet get paid in peanuts. I mean
Truly.
that. So empathy, being in those people's shoes and understanding what it feels like to fight so hard to make ends meet, and then some dipshit boss wants to fire you because, God forbid, you're having a kid and you need some time off to take care of that kid. God forbid your knee gets hurt working and you need an accommodation to recover and they want to cut your hours. Fuck that. Sorry. But
You can swear on this podcast.
oh, thank
Yeah,
God.
we are not a
Fuck
clean
that.
podcast.
We have a warning label.
Oh,
We're
good,
proud of.
good. Yeah. Yeah. So empathy for sure. I think it's
Yeah.
very hard to be a good, true workers' rights lawyer if you don't really understand what it means to be working class. And then also, I saw in the fire service a level of poverty in the United States and in California, frankly, I did not know existed. I had been told my whole life, you're in the greatest country on earth. Even the poorest in America is better off than some of the just average people in other countries. I am telling you from experience, there are parts of this country where there is no material difference in quality of life between that person here in the United States and someone in where you might imagine, people are so wrong about foreign countries, what you might imagine life in Baghdad is like. The violence, the uncertainty. We don't have the Taliban or Al Qaeda out here, but we have gangs, and we have gangs that visit people's homes and extract money and services from them against their will. We have we have a severe lack of basic resources and basic services for people. So part of what changed me was just observing those things as a firefighter. America has potential to be the greatest country on earth, but we're not. We leave a lot of people behind. And it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're mooching off the government. It's because they got dealt a really bad hand and they were not given any viable path out of that hand. So where's this all going? This is part of why I think that pushed me into being a workers' rights lawyer. Because people who go to work, they're there because they're trying to earn an honest living than they are right now. And they're doing it with their work. The very least they're entitled to is to be paid for all hours work, be paid a decent, livable wage, not get groped by your boss while you're at work, not get assaulted with racial slurs or be treated, just having some decency at work. So all of those factors together, Mel and Francesca, they conspired to make me the very loud-mouthed workers' right advocate you see today.
Well, we're very
Love to
glad
see
that
it.
happened.
Yeah.
Employment law. Give us the third grade definition of what the hell is it?
So employment law is actually a very broad umbrella, and
Okay.
we can broadly think of it as the relationship between employers and employees. Now, it breaks off into many subdivisions after that. So we start at the top, the relationship between employer and employee. The next two umbrellas in employment law, it's employer side and employee side. That just roughly we can think of it this way. On
Sure.
employer side, you're going to see the big defense firms, Ogletree Deakins, Jackson Lewis, Gordon Reese, Fisher Phillips. These are all big law firms, big, huge corporate law firms that are similar to what you might see on Suits. I mean, Suits is not an accurate representation of what law firms look like, but if
It's
you're thinking,
not?
ooh,
What?
yeah, I know. But to the lay person who's thinking, ooh, big, fancy corporate office, like those big defense firms kind of fall in that. And their job is they defend those employers against lawsuits, whether they be big wage and hour class actions, discrimination claims. Basically, they fight people like me. They also assist with things like compliance and labor relations. They might assist with negotiation between an employer and a union, or just complying with different labor codes in different states. So that's one side. The other side is the employee side, the workers' rights side, as I like to say. That's my side. Okay. And our job is we make sure that the employer is treating the employee in a legal and ethical manner. We make sure that the employee's right to form a union, engage in concerted activities, get paid for all their hours worked, get paid the appropriate wages, be free from discrimination, free from harassment, free from unsafe and toxic work conditions, be compensated for injuries sustained on the job. That's the side I work on. So that big umbrella of employment law, it's a very big umbrella. And I'm not here to say that one side is better than the other. Obviously, I'm very biased in favor of workers. I'm not a judge. It is not my job to be neutral. It is my job to stand up for the team I chose, and I chose the workers' rights team. The other side, the defense team, they do important work. They do compliance, and they help employers ideally have good work practices. Now, unfortunately, I meet the other side in court where they are fighting me, so they feel like the bad guys most of the time. And I definitely have popped off on some opposing counsels before. Those are the two big realms.
Do
of
they
employment law.
Do you find also, in addition to the folks that are your big mega firms that are
Mhm.
representing employers, do companies actually have internal lawyers themselves as well?
Yeah, they'll have in-house and corporate counsel. Now, the kinds of defense side lawyers I come up against vary a lot of variety. Now, the big firms I see most often, the ones I listed before, the big law firms I see most often. You'll also see some smaller boutique firms. Frankly, on a case-by-case basis, we do defense work too. If the employer is aligned with us ethically and it's a good case, we will defend them. Occasionally, we'll go up against their internal counsel, their corporate counsel, but by the time we start filing lawsuits, they refer that out to a real litigation firm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Your in-house counsel you can see is like a general practitioner or maybe your primary care physician. And the minute things go to litigation, a lot of times they'll say, okay, I'm going to refer you out to the litigation people.
It's been interesting sitting in HR for as long as Mel and I have been in it. We've seen things like anti-sexual harassment coming up
Yeah.
now, anti-bullying, right? You're seeing things like pay transparency coming up. Do you see it changing? Do you see this becoming more towards the workers' rights angle? Do you see this evolving? Yeah, ooh, wow, you're shaking your head. I like tell me what the next like couple of years looks like.
It's so tough, Francesca. It is such a mixed bag right now. I struggle here because I don't want to be hyper partisan, but something really funky is in the air these days. And it may be because it's an election year. It may be because Donald is trying to come to power again. There's a lot of things going on. What has happened in the past 4 or 5 years is we are seeing very clear friction between employers and employees. Employers did not take care of their people during the COVID pandemic. They laid everyone off at the first sign of trouble. They overburdened who was left, did not give them the pay raises they need. They denied people sick leave when they got sick with COVID. They didn't treat people with any sense of dignity if a family member was sick or passed from it. And people are still bitter about it. Also, let's not forget that these companies shut offices down, sent everyone home, had them work from home. And we realized for the first time, oh my God, I can get all this done here at home. I don't have to burn money and time with a commute. I don't have to take time away from my family. I can go to the doctor and take care of my health and still get all my work done. And now the employers are punishing remote employees for a decision the employer made 4 years ago, mind you. They're punishing you for their choices with these return to office mandates. Dell Computers got into some trouble because now they're saying that you can stay remote if you want, but you won't be considered for a promotion. And it makes you ask, what's the whole point of coming to the office when Dell's own CEO said 3 years ago that if you are depending on return to office mandates for office culture, you're doing something wrong. Complete 180. So where does this all lead us? We have this friction between employer and employee because of events of the past 4 years. People are really reconsidering their relationship with work.
Yeah.
On top of that, we have a very active and very disjointed Republican Party, which controls about half of our state's legislatures. And somehow, some way, in the Trump campaign and the MAGA movement and the Republican Party, workers' rights became woke, and woke became this buzzword to galvanize voters in an election year. And so we saw it in Georgia, we're seeing it in Florida, we saw it in Indiana. Republican controlled state legislatures stripping away workers' protections, particularly in the area of child labor. I thought we cared about kids. Why are we making it so 14, 15, 16-year-olds can be required to work with dangerous machines, required to work overtime, required to work during school hours? So please pressure your representatives if that's what's happening in your state. The other thing we saw an attempt at it in Florida. I don't know if it's successful yet. And we saw a successful attempt in Texas to ban, preempt, prevent state and not state, municipal level and county level governments from enacting meal, rest, and heat protections for workers. So
Unreal.
yeah. And then we look at Missouri, looking at eliminating all taxes for corporations when 1 in 7 people from Missouri live at or below the poverty line. What the hell are reducing those taxes going to do except hurt workers? We have such a patchwork of values in this country. And it's really tough right now as a workers' rights lawyer to see the places where we are losing ground, primarily in red states. And it's frustrating because when you think of the average Republican voter, I think of a working class blue collar person. And I don't understand how the Republican Party has twisted itself in the past few years to where suddenly workers' protections are the enemy. Now, that was a long route. You're saying, where are things going? And I apologize for the partisanship here. And if that's your party of choice, I'm begging you, call your representatives and tell them, look, not everything that corporate donors want you to do is a good idea. Stripping child labor protections, there's really no excuse for that shit.
Yeah, we just covered.
Vetoing a minimum wage increase in your state because you say it's not needed, go fuck yourself.
Mhm.
Where workers' rights are gaining ground, I mean, California is looking at adopting, I call it the Portugal rule, where they're talking about protections where you don't have to answer your employer's calls and emails after working hours, where we have the new minimum wage law for fast food workers. And yes, it's controversial. Was there some funny business with that? Let me dial it back. This was an interesting one. So California enacted a $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food employees. Now, not all fast food employees, only fast food employees of major brands with 60 or more locations. So that eliminates a fairly successful mom and pop. If you have Mel's Diner and you've got 5 locations, you don't have to pay $20 an hour. Okay. Funny business with that one. For some reason, Panera Bread was exempted. And then it came out that Panera Bread made some donations to Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign. So everyone's pretty pissed off about that. And then, of course, the companies did what we expected they would do. They raised prices. It's a problem because companies were cranking up prices on anyone before the increase. And it's not like they're just breaking even. We're not talking about Mel's Diner with 5 locations. We're talking Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, big companies here. Their profit margins are fine. They can afford to pay better wages to workers, but they're looking at their quarterly earnings report and they want to make sure their margins go up every quarter. So they're going to raise prices no matter what. But the minimum wage increase gave them an excuse to say, see, we told you all along, enacting workers' rights protections hurts the economy. It's bad for business. Francesca, that was a very long-winded way of saying what's going on with workers' rights in this country right now. It is the most active battlefield we have seen since 1933. We are very much in early New Deal territory. And workers' rights advocates like myself are getting very fired up because we think that the results of this election, which political party and which ideology gets to control legislative activity for the next 4 or 5, 6 years is going to be very, very important. What I do is fundamentally political. And which political party controls the legislature, be it federal or in your state, has a huge impact on what kind of worker protections we have and how effective our agencies who we entrust with enforcing those protections are going to be. So I do get a lot of people who get upset. They say, Ryan, why are you always talking politics? What do you think the point of politics is?
Well, and who nominates
Politics
judges and
it's
lobbying groups and everything, right? Like this
who
is
gets
political.
to decide the rules? What
Right.
are the rules and
Right.
who gets to decide them? And as a workers' rights lawyer, worker rights don't come from thin air. They come from laws that we put down on books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Man, there's a lot of just shit happening in this space. Like the child labor thing kills me. When we covered it a few months ago, I think we read somewhere that like a 15-year-old lost his arm recently, and like they found him working in a slaughterhouse or something. I don't know. It's just killed me.
No,
All these stories.
The poultry and butchering industries are notorious for this. I'm not going to name any specific companies for reasons that should be obvious, but we do see a lot of child labor violations in the poultry and butchering and meat packing industries. A lot of them are immigrant children. A lot of them are children without documentation. And it's such a shame that it's been so politicized. My opponents truly think it doesn't matter because those kids are not white. They weren't born here. They quote unquote shouldn't be here in the first place. This angry, vengeful idea of putting people into different buckets of who deserves more protections and just
human
this
beings.
fundamental. Yeah. And I think that's just the old firefighter in me coming up. Never, ever would we go on a rescue mission and say, well, do they have papers? We don't fucking
Yes.
care. It's a person. It's a human
Mhm.
being.
Right.
These arbitrary lines we drew on a map. You go up to space, there's no lines, by the way. Everyone's shocked. There's no lines in space. We're all human beings.
Right.
It's tough right now, but I don't want to be doom and gloom. I hope people are a little outraged because that might motivate you to research your candidates and, before just knee jerking on a party line, like, oh, this person's a Democrat, they must be about workers' rights. Do research the
Yeah.
candidates you're voting for and what job they are going to do. Don't be putting people in power who say they care about workers' rights, but behind closed doors, they're accepting lobby money from, the
Panera.
lobby who are, yeah, exactly. You want to make sure, yeah, from Panera, exactly. Yeah. So, but also do take hope. There are people working very hard to fight back. I'm not the only workers' rights lawyer in the country. I'm one of a very wide network of workers' rights lawyers. There are thousands of us, and we are working very hard to stand up for workers. The ACLU is standing up for workers' rights. Workers' rights and civil rights go hand in hand. There are politicians who are brave and speak up and push back. And then on top of that, we have advocacy groups standing up for people who are just trying to pay their rent, pay their groceries, pay their medical bills, and have some to take their family to Chili's on a Friday night.
Getting down to the employee and the day-to-day, what are 3 things everyone should be doing as an employee?
There's a few things that come to mind. The first is I tell people just because you're an employee doesn't mean you're not an entrepreneur in some way. All of us are self-employed, truly. Now, it may be you only have one client, and that client is your employer. And what do you sell them? Your time, your expertise, and your labor. You should be tracking your hours at work. You should be tracking the duties and the tasks you complete at work. Don't just show up and go into automaton mode. And the reason this is so important is because as a lawyer, I track my time. I don't bill my clients for my time. We're contingency, but I bill the insurance and the employer and all that for my time. I get paid from them, but I have to track the work I do. Why would you do any different as an employee? Track your hours, track the tasks you are doing, and do a quarterly audit. Check in and be like, hey, my duties are growing, but my pay is staying the same. That's going to give you an opportunity to talk to your client, your employer, and say, hey, my duties have grown. Here, I can show you because I tracked it. I would like a raise that is commensurate with the extra duties I am doing, So that's the first tip. Track your time, track your duties, and remember that fundamentally we're all self-employed and you need to get paid appropriately for your work. The second one, if you have a problem at work, do a report in writing. One of the biggest mistakes I made in the fire service is I did have a back injury at an incident. And everyone told me that if you admit that you were hurt, if anyone knows that you're weak, you're soft, you're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your job and there's going to be nothing you can do. Those people were not lawyers and they did not have my best interest at heart. I wish I had reported it. We do have protections. I would have gotten the medical care I needed and my back would probably be in better shape now than it is. So when something happens, you are touched in a way you don't like being touched. You are threatened. You are treated with disrespect and you suspect the reason was because you are a woman, because you are gay, because you were born in Lebanon, because you are an immigrant, because you are pregnant. If you suspect you're being bullied for those kind of reasons, report it, but do it in writing and keep a copy for yourself. Never report a work injury or suspected harassment over the phone or face to face, and don't trust it on a company server because I promise they're going to delete it the minute they get the chance. Report it in writing, keep a copy for yourself. That's your second tip. Your third tip is more emotional. There's a story I like telling people, if you'll indulge me. There's this fantastic violinist. Well, he's still around, Joshua Bell. He's the LeBron James of violin, basically. He is the guy. Child prodigy, premiered at Carnegie Hall at 17 years old, won all of these awards. He performed at the White House. He performed with Hans Zimmer. His music has been featured in Hollywood blockbusters like Angels and Demons with Tom Hanks. He's a big deal. And if you want to go to one of his concerts, you better be ready to whip out a huge amount of money for a ticket. He's a big deal. Well, The Washington Post in 2007, 2008 wanted to do a social experiment. They thought, what if we took this extraordinary world-class prodigy musician and took him out of these golden, highfalutin opera houses and put him in a DC metro, the subway? What would happen? Now, the theory was that it would just grind the whole place to a halt to put this legendary musician there. They were really curious. So they filmed him for 45 minutes. He put on a little disguise, put on a little baseball cap and a light jacket, and he played for 45 minutes. Here's what happened. No one gave a flying fuck about this guy in that metro. It was sad. 1,000 people passed by. Seven stopped to listen to the music. Of the 7, only 1 even recognized him. Only 1 person said, holy shit, that's Joshua Bell. Everyone else just thought, oh, hey, a guy playing violin. That's nice. Must be a tough time for him. We'll tip him some money. By the way, he made $54 in tips down there. For a guy who's used to making, $80,000 a night, that's not very good. This guy was a pretty high ticket performer. What's the lesson here? The lesson is, no matter how extraordinary you are, no matter how talented or worthy or wonderful, if you are in the wrong place, you will be treated as ordinary, invisible, or even disposable. I hope you all know that Joshua Bell didn't leave that DC metro station thinking, wow, I'm a loser. No one cares about my music. I'm only worth $54. That didn't define him. He knew who he was. It was just an experiment. The point is, you can never allow the way a toxic work environment or a manager or the rate you are being paid to affect the way you view yourself. You wouldn't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. You should never judge yourself or your worth by the way a workplace treats you.
One more time for the cheap seats in the back. Damn right.
Never judge yourself by the way a workplace treats you. Because I'll say it one more time. No matter how wonderful you are, if you're in the wrong place, you're going to be treated like you're ordinary, disposable, invisible.
We see it.
And that was my journey in the fire service. And I want to be very clear. I made great, dear friends in the fire service. I still keep in touch with many of them. And most of my career was great. I ended up in one bad firehouse with bad leadership and bad coworkers. It was a bad mix of people. And that was my DC metro station, that station. But I didn't know then what I knew now. I really took it personally. There was a time in that station where my stomach hurt all the time. And I thought, am I a bad firefighter? Am I not a man? Am I not a good person? Am I not worthy of friendship and brotherhood? Am I really only worth $16.50 an hour? That's what I was paid, by the way, as a firefighter. Is that really all I'm worth? I let it affect me. But now I can look back and say, yeah, I was just in the wrong place.
That's a great message and a good reminder for everybody. Like, your environment will make or break you. And you've got to choose to not let it break you if it's the wrong place.
And there's a million reasons not to leave. I hear it all the time. People say, oh, you're coming from a point of privilege, Ryan. People need their money. It's not so easy just to leave. What you're saying is easier said than done. I've even had people get mad and say, what you're telling people to do is dangerous. You're bad. You're going to get someone hurt. It's like, a toxic workplace will kill you faster than smoking will. And yes, it is harder to leave than to stay. It is easier said than done, but what's your alternative? You can take the advice or not. If you're in a bad place, make a change and maybe it'll work out. But if you stay where you are, it's just going to get worse.
Well, I think it takes a lot of people saying that message around, this is not acceptable, move, and you have options, right? You don't need to stay. That messaging is relatively recent. And I think it really is. And I get that. There are many times we've talked about toxic work environment. We get the same feedback around, you're coming from a place of privilege. People need to work. And believe me, I get that. Mel gets that. But I've had jobs that have literally almost destroyed me. Destroyed me. Yeah. And I think I'm not unusual in that. I think a lot of people have. So I'm like, the more we can be like, not acceptable. If you're in a train station, get yourself to your Carnegie Hall.
I like that. I'm going to steal that. Well, we're being recorded, so I guess I can't. But
we'll send you the clip.
It is documented. No, but right, that's That's
I love that. Well, Francesca, I know I'm the one being interviewed, but I'm really curious. Is there a specific work environment that you recall where you thought, "Wow, this is destroying my health"?
Yes.
What was it?
It was a work environment where I felt very much like I was getting sabotaged. It was pretty clear that they did not want me there.
I had that with the guy. God, he was the worst guy in the world, man. And he would do that too, the sabotage thing. And this is part of the many things that pushed me out. He would play pranks on me that were beyond not funny because they put me in jeopardy. He liked to hide my radio or turn off my radio. And the reason he would do that is because he wanted to make it look like I was not responsible, not responding to calls, not paying attention to things. He wanted to make me look bad. He would hide keys to things. I would stock the engine with stuff and he would remove it and then go tell the captain, oh, Stygar's not doing his stuff. But that was all stuff that could have gotten me seriously injured or killed. You know,
Yeah,
it
that's
really
terrifying.
wasn't cool. But why do you think you got singled out, Francesca? I mean,
well, because I'm an asshole.
Yeah, I picked that up. You've been very hostile.
Yeah, like I just look at your face and I say asshole.
You got a
Yeah.
punchable face, yeah. So,
You know,
I'm kidding.
Listen, I typically get brought into orgs to make big change, and people don't like that.
No, they do
And
not. Being
no.
the change agent, you're going to be a lightning rod for controversy.
Yeah.
It's everyone's reasons will be different. I know the reasons he targeted me is he was just a deeply troubled. So why was I targeted by this guy? He just saw someone who was lower ranked than him, didn't have as much pull, and he could take out his aggressive sadistic tendencies on me. And that's what he ended up doing to another firefighter years after I had left. What's the point of that story? 2 points, really. The first is you cannot take it personal. I think that's been a theme for the past 20 minutes here. It's not because you are a bad person. It wasn't because I was not tough enough to be a firefighter. It wasn't because I was a bad person. It was because this was a sick individual who just saw a convenient target, the new guy. That's the first lesson. The second lesson is you have to make a change. Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing too, when you look at any kind of organization, whether it's a
Mhm.
corporation, government agency, political, it doesn't matter. Academia, we see this in academia, the
Yeah.
woman that just died by suicide because she was allegedly getting bullied by her president, right? Which I believe is still going on.
Bullying in academia is I do a lot of consultations. I do a lot of academia, universities. They might be number one, tied with hospitals for bullying.
I
Oh,
fucking
wow.
believe it. I
Yeah.
believe it. You know, especially when you get people in there that are tenured and
I don't know what the policy effects of removing tenure would be, but it would probably help with the bullying situation. Because I got to tell you, every week I see maybe 3 or 4.
Wow.
We're a very high volume practice. We get 200 to 250 inquiries a day, people seeking help. So yeah, I really get, it's a tough time to be working class in the United States.
Yeah.
It's a tough time. And where it affects people's self-esteem, it's another thing where it's easier said than done. Oh, just don't take it personally. Wow, I never thought of that. Thank you. Great tip.
Yeah.
Just don't let it bother me. Never thought of that. What part of the reason it bothers people so much is the powerlessness. As human beings, we like to think we have agency, we have some control over our lives, we have some dignity that we can live with. And in the workplace, when your paycheck and your reputation are on the line, and there's a hierarchy where someone can kick you and you're not allowed to kick back, that fucks with your head. And it fucked with mine pretty hard too.
Yeah.
It took me a long time. It's so funny because what I do now is so confrontational and I have no problem confronting and pushing people back, but I had to relearn how to look people in the eye and push back when I wasn't being treated with respect. There was a period of my life after I'd left that station where I couldn't handle conflict. I would look at the ground if someone looked at me too long. Like my self-esteem was on the floor. Seriously, my mid-20s were 1 star, 0 star. Do not recommend. I had to unlearn a lot of weird programming from my childhood. I had to unlearn a lot of deep self-esteem issues and scars that I had taken from the fire service because of the way I was bullied. I had to reestablish my value as a person because I was making so little money. But yeah, that's why it's so hard for people, because what do you do when you're getting pushed and you can't push back?
I'm curious about those people that they're experiencing something at work. Let's say I'm coming to you. How do I move through that?
Oh man, that opens up a few things. Let's first start with bullying. Like I said before, bullying by itself is not illegal. It becomes
Yes.
illegal when the bullying. Yeah, we're going to see. There's various initiatives for that. That could be a whole other podcast episode, because where is the line between, hey, my boss told me to do my job at my job and I'm just kind of a dickhead and I don't like being bossed around, or hey, my boss is actually a predator and I need help. Where is that line? It's tough when you deal with subjective things like what is bullying. Fortunately, we have an objective measure that is illegal, and that's a hostile work environment. It's not the same as bullying. A hostile work environment is severe or pervasive abuse directed at you because of a protected activity or a protected characteristic. Severe, legal definition, it's so outrageous it has no place in civil society. Twisting a subordinate's nipple, outrageous, has no place in civil society. Calling someone the N-word, outrageous, has no place in civil society. Or it can be pervasive. It doesn't have to be some crazy earth-shattering moment like having your nipple twisted. It can be something more subtle that happens over a long period of time. That's pervasive. Great examples I've seen are managers staring at an assistant's breasts, and over and over and over, just cannot look at anything but her breasts, checking out her butt, eyeing her up and down, making her feel really uncomfortable. She speaks up and he says, it's a compliment. You're beautiful. Did he touch her? No. Are any of those instances by themselves so outrageous they have no place in civil society? Well, it depends on who you ask, but if we did a poll, it would probably skew towards no, this is just rude behavior. But it happened over a long period of time, so it became a hostile work environment.
Yeah.
What do those things all have in common? The abuse is motivated by a protected activity or a protected characteristic. If someone is physically touching you at work, it doesn't matter if they're sexually attracted to you. It doesn't matter if they're the same sex. It doesn't matter if they were just joking. We can typically call that some form of sexual harassment. Hands off your nipples. Don't stare at my butt. Sexual harassment. N-word. Obviously not okay. You would think it would go away in 2024. It's not. I have a case where I'm dealing with it right now. Motivated by your race. Now, here's the other thing. The abuser it's still illegal if they're wrong. I've seen this happen a few times. I've had a client where they thought she was Asian. She was not Asian. She was white, but they would just make a lot of, I can't say what they said on here. It's messed up, but they would make a lot of Asian jokes to her that were not funny, not cool. She wasn't even Asian, but it's still valid because they're attacking her on the basis of race. That's a confusing one for people. We see that a lot in people who are ethnically ambiguous. It doesn't matter. I want to be clear that even if you are white, there's this rumor that, oh, white people aren't protected under these laws. You are. There's a rumor that men are not protected under these laws. You are. Your race, your gender, all of those things are protected, even if they're perceived. Now, that's a hostile work environment. We took a long detour. That is illegal. Being targeted for those reasons is illegal. Now, what do? You mentioned an interesting point, Francesca. You said, what if you don't like your HR, you don't trust them? Well, here's the problem. You cannot hold your employer liable legally, financially for harassment, retaliation, discrimination if they do not know or have reason to know that the abuse is occurring. So if you're being targeted by a coworker, a peer, someone at your level, until you make a report, there's no liability on the company's side in most situations. Now, if the person attacking you is a manager with hiring and firing power, in many states, the liability is automatic, but still, you're going to need to make some kind of report to make it stick. So, HR, treat them like you would treat the police. Don't be engaging in unsolicited chit chat with them. I'm telling you as a lawyer, don't go up to cop cars and start talking about your day. Every police interaction is potentially dangerous, even if you are innocent. Okay. Don't be going up to HR and telling them about all your issues. They are not your school counselor. They are not your therapist. They're not your buddy. They're definitely not your lawyer. They are there to be a conduit for workplace disputes and keep them under control so the business functions. And when lawsuits start to fly, they're there to protect the company from you. Even the most kindest, caring, most empathetic, wonderful HR rep ultimately works for the company, and it's not their job to tell you how to win a lawsuit against their boss. It's not their job, and it's not fair to ask them to do that anyway. But if you do not communicate with them, the employer can simply say, we had no idea this person was twisting your nipples. We had no idea this person was making Asian hate jokes at you. We had no idea. And so you don't win any compensation or any justice for that. So you've got to report to HR, keep your communications objective, neutral, professional, on point. Do not burden HR with long-winded, just every problem under the sun. Keep it short. Hi, Mel. I am writing to report harassment I am experiencing from my supervisor, John Smith. On April 5th at 4:05 p.m., he told me I have beautiful oriental eyes and slapped my butt. What can the company do to protect me in this situation?
Oh, I like that sentence. What can the
Mhm.
company do to protect me in this situation?
Yeah. Those facts come from a real case. It's insane. It's insane. I do get told sometimes, not a lot, that people think I am unneeded. Like they're like, what does an employment lawyer even do? It's 2024. This stuff doesn't happen. I am telling you, a person looked at my client, said, you have beautiful oriental eyes, and touched her butt. Like they really think that there's no consequences for shit. The stuff I see will make your head pop.
It's all that lead paint.
It might be. Well, in all fairness, our parents are full of lead and asbestos. We're full of microplastics. So,
There you
everyone's
go.
got their
Yeah.
problems. But yeah, we talked about HR. We talked about that. And then, yeah, the reporting is key. And when you make that report, keep it short or objective. The script I offered works just fine. Save a copy for yourself.
Yeah.
Save a copy for yourself.
Documentation all
They
day, every
will
day.
delete it. They're not supposed to. It's spoliation. I know it. It's like, oh, this lawyer doesn't know what he's talking about. That's illegal to destroy evidence. Yeah, no shit. It's illegal to destroy evidence. Guess what? They do it anyway. It's illegal to break the speed limit. I did that on the way here.
When should people reach out to a lawyer? When's the right time?
It depends on a few situations. So
Mhm.
here's how workers' rights lawyers like myself work. Now, it's a unique specialty. It's not like personal injury where all consultations are free. Different employment lawyers might charge fees for the consultation, but you don't have to go to the only employment lawyer you find. You can call multiple offices and some will give you a free case evaluation. We do free case evaluations at my office. Now, you can't take an hour of my time for free, but we'll take a look and we'll let you know if we see something. It doesn't hurt to ask. It
Mhm.
doesn't hurt to ask, hey, do I have a case here? Now, if you need advice because you're in a tricky situation, good one I see very, very often is you want to take FMLA leave. You have a baby coming and you're not sure what your rights are and your employer is acting kind of funny about it. Talk to an employment lawyer because in a lot of those cases, we'll give you advice. We'll give you 30, 40 minutes of advice for free. We'll say, look, these are your rights. Here's how we recommend you talk to them. And if they retaliate, if things get worse, come on back. We'll sign you.
Okay.
So when is the right time? I don't think it's ever too early because what's the consequence? If you're getting a free case evaluation, worst they say is, hey, we're not going to sign you. Talk to a couple other lawyers to be sure. If things are really bad and a lawyer wants 150, 200 bucks, you're going to have to weigh whether that's worth it. But there's also offices like mine where if we see writing on the wall, we'll be like, look, we know that if this gets worse, you'll come to us to sign as a client. So we'll give you free advice until you need it. So anyway, that was a very unhelpful lawyerly response. I could have just said it depends.
It depends. I was going to say
It depends.
It
The answer to
depends.
everything.
Well, it
Yeah.
depends.
No, I think it's good. It's good because it's just have the consultation. If you're uncertain, have the consultation, have the conversation.
And employment lawyers, workers' rights lawyers, as I like to say, we're really accessible to people. The majority of my clients are unemployed.
Mhm.
Go figure, wrongful termination. Another big majority are low income, minimum wage, just above minimum wage. There's this small segment of people hop in my comments, be like, oh, don't listen to this guy. He just wants you to sue your employer, even though he knows you won't win because he wants your money. That is not how it works. I don't get paid unless we win. And I only get a percentage of what we win. So it's not like I'm going to take the first low ball they throw at you. My job is to get maximum justice for you.
When I was a paralegal, it was a percentage. It was some random like 33.33%
That's
of the
common.
settlement.
Yeah. That's how we are at my office. It's 33.3 for most cases. It varies actually.
Yeah.
So the most common is 33.3. Workers' comp, it's like 15.
Yeah.
Class action, it's 25. Trial, like the big show, 40.
Yep. That makes sense. Yeah.
And some people get mad and they're like, how can you charge so much money? It's like,
well, it's
you're
time,
welcome
effort, research.
The courts are accessible to everyone. You can
Mhm.
represent yourself and see how it goes. It's not like we don't bring any value to the table here,
Right.
and the client always walks away with the lion's share of the fees anyway, or not the fees, the recovery anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I front all the expense. I'm not trying to say that we're the best people in the world, but we front all the expenses. I have one case I put 15K into it before we even filed because I got expert witness reports and investigations, all that stuff. It makes justice accessible because for that client where it was $15,000 of prep work just to file, it's a really unique case where we needed some expert opinions and some investigation before we got in. She couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
She couldn't even afford the $435 filing fee. That's what it costs to file in California Superior Court anyway. She couldn't afford that. Certainly couldn't afford these experts. So by saying, hey, I'll take your case on contingency. Yes, I'm going to take a percentage. Yes, it's a big percentage, but all the way up along, you've got a world-class law firm with very experienced attorneys in your corner, and we're paying all the expenses for you all in the way.
I mean, the risk, you're taking on a lot of the risk up front, plus
Yeah.
this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, and if we lose that case, she's not getting a bill. I just eat that cost.
Right, you
That's
eat the
my risk of
cost. You're
doing
taking on the
business.
whole risk. Right.
Yeah.
I think people need to know that because otherwise, it's not a greedy business.
Well,
So-
yeah, and the TLDR of the thing is justice is accessible. You don't worry about the cost. Talk to a few different lawyers, and if all of them want a fee up front, if none of them seem like they want your case, it may be possible that what happened to you was unfair, but maybe not legally actionable.
Yeah,
It's
that's a
tough
good call out.
situation.
What are some signs? Well, you just called out one thing. Like if they're trying to get all of those fees up front, obviously your case might not be as strong as possible. Like be wary
It's
of
an
that.
orange flag, not a red flag.
Are there red flags people should look out for?
Well, yeah, if no attorney wants your case, it's because you may not have a case. If no lawyer wants your case, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're a bad person. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's that the United States and the global sphere of industrialized, quote unquote, advanced economies has some of the weakest worker protections of any country who we would consider a peer. There's some things that are unfair. They are objectively wrong, what happened to you, but not legally actionable. So what am I going to do as a lawyer?
We have something that we like to call rapid round.
I'm down to clown. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. What is your funniest case?
My funniest case? Oh man,
Yeah.
by its nature, what I do is not particularly funny. I will say, oh my God, it is funny to me when married men hit on my clients and they think that because they deleted the text messages on their phone, that the text messages are gone. They are not gone. We have them. It is very funny to me when we get into a deposition and read text messages aloud.
Oh, Jesus.
From married, late 40s, early 50s, 60-year-old men texting my 20-something-year-old clients of all the things they'd like to do. And then after they're done reading that, you just say, Mr. Johnson, are you married? Yeah.
Oh my God.
Do you have a good
Embarrassing.
referral for a divorce attorney?
Yeah.
I do. I say, hey, yeah, I got a few of those. Why is it funny to me? You're a pervert. You were picking on my client. I don't care about you. you can explain to the missus why you're going to a deposition today.
Gosh, I remember a friend of mine, she worked for, and when she showed up to his house to drop some stuff off at his house, this old perv opened up the door naked, completely naked, telling her she had to carry this thing in. So she had no choice but to come in, and he's just standing there talking to her naked for 15 minutes.
I'd have gotten her a bag for that. I hope she talked to somebody.
Let me get this straight. If someone shows you their junk, you automatically have a case, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it would depend on a few things. A situation where I could see it not being a case. Again, every situation is different.
Sure.
Your coworkers, Billy from accounting comes to you, says, Francesca, I want to take you out on a date. You say, why not? I got nothing else going on. You go on the date with Billy. He's your coworker, not your boss. During the date, he whips it out and you say, okay, that was weird. I'm never going to talk to you again. That may not be legally actionable by itself. You went on a date outside working hours. He was a coworker. It happened one time, especially if the company fires him or disciplines for him. I wouldn't start, running up a credit card bill thinking you're getting a settlement for that.
Okay, so if someone shows you their junk during working hours,
that's
you most likely
totally
have a case.
thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Where these cases get complicated, and I've seen a few of them, is when something happens outside the workplace. Now, if it's a manager, there's going to be this big legal fight of if they were acting within their capacity as a manager. Workplace retreats are crazy.
Oh, geez.
Workplace
Yes.
retreats, everyone reverts to being a 16-year-old at summer camp. They think it's cute to sneak into people's beds naked and stuff. It is shocking to me. Being an employment lawyer, I have come to the conclusion that there's no such thing as a grown-up. It's a fantasy. It's a convenient fiction, this idea of adults and grown-ups that we have made in our heads. They are not real. We are nothing but a bunch of preteens and teens running around with bodies that are getting a little wrinkly. There's no grown-ups out there.
When I was an intern here in the state capitol, the head of our office said to me when I was 22, she was like, honey, all it is in life is adult daycare. And if you can remember that, you'll be successful. And I'm like, I found that to be true. Yes.
It is very true. And it's adult daycare is accurate. I like the teen summer camp thing because I got to tell you, we handle so many sexual harassment cases. I mean, people they're horny, and it's a problem. I don't know how else to say it.
That's going to be into the trailer for this episode.
Boring employment lawyer. What's this all about?
yes.
People are horny.
It's a problem.
It is. I get it. We're human beings. You're going to see people. You're going to find them attractive. But for the love of God, don't act on it.
Keep it to yourself. Oh my God. What's the type of case that comes up? I'm assuming it's going to be this since people are horny and have a problem. But like, what type of case do you see most often popping up?
Honestly, that gets a little boring. The most common is probably wage theft. Wage theft is typically not accidental. It is one of the most rampant crimes in the US. There's a headline that goes around saying it is the #1 most expensive crime in the US. I'm not sure that's true if you count for things like insider trading and stuff like that. It costs American workers close to $50 billion a year. So wage theft by far, and it tends to affect the lowest earning people the most. I have multiple class actions that I work on. We deal with it all the time. So wage theft by far. That's why I tell people track your time carefully. Do not trust your employer. They have lawyers. I bet that. Nope. They have a systemic process. They create confusing comp plans, weird commission structures, weird pay stubs that don't make any sense to anybody. They're stealing from you. Not those specific companies. Just for example, just because your company is a big, huge corporation, don't assume it's on the up and up. In fact, the bigger and more powerful the company, the more likely it is they've engineered some sort of way to shave off your wages. So wage theft by far. And then after that, FMLA retaliation. The United States is very backwards in a lot of things, including our approach to family leave and medical leave. It's a hotbed for retaliation. The most common form of discrimination we see is pregnancy discrimination. I have more pregnancy discrimination cases than race, national origin, and LGBTQ discrimination combined. Pregnancy is the #1 most common form of discrimination I see.
When in the pregnancy cycle, like when
all cycles, everything.
Cycle. Okay.
It tends to cool off a bit when you come back, but then God forbid you need to pump. We have a lot of problems with that. Pregnancy is a really big one, and you'd be surprised. Females will attack subordinate females for it. It's a mistake to assume that someone who has experienced pregnancy themselves in some capacity or is a woman will not discriminate against you. It's in the employment context, those loyalties that you would expect exist don't always exist. And then, of course, sexual harassment, probably marginally more pregnancy discrimination than gross sexual harassment. I mean, if I signed every sexual harassment case that came through my door, it would probably be #1, but we're only a team of 10. So we're pretty selective about which cases we choose to run with. And if we can't take it, we try to send it to a partner of ours.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, the pregnancy thing, I just myself alone, and Francesca, you probably know, I have 3 girlfriends who were let go while on FMLA.
I would have got them a bag.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of employers get around it too by firing the whole org.
We see that a lot. And this is a message, I should probably put it out once a week, honestly. There's this myth that employers can get around these rules by just doing a mass layoff or eliminating a whole department. We look at that stuff and we'll say, hey, we think it's kind of odd that you fired 30 people from your organization and half of them were people who took FMLA leave in the past year and a half. I attend a lot of conferences, and I've been at conferences where I've had HR reps tell me, hey, don't tell anyone, but I work at XYZ company and we're laying off 600 people. And we were definitely told subtly to skew towards older workers.
Yeah.
This stuff happens. It is intentional. It is a myth. It is a myth to think, oh, my company has lawyers and legal teams and they're going to make sure everything they do is perfectly legal. No, they play games.
Yeah.
But the good news is you've got lawyers like myself. Again, I'm not alone. And that stuff is easy to sniff out. If it's genuinely some shenanigans going on, there's going to be clues. And we don't need a confession. We don't need a smoking gun. We can pull the data and say, it's really weird that 40% of this mass layoff was people with disabilities or people over 40. Like you don't have to be a legal genius. Now, how do you get that information? Where do you get it? How do you fight for it? Because they're not going to want to give it to you. That's where the legal expertise comes in. But to look at the clues and figure out if something illegal happened, a jury is smart. They'll figure that out. Yeah.
What's something that organizations get right, or what
Well,
you've seen some organizations do well?
it'll vary by the organization, obviously. I mean, some companies just treat their employees like crap, and that's just their core value is treating people badly. The best thing I think a company can do, paying your people well, give them regular raises, give them a clear path upward, make it clear what is expected. If they want to go from, hey, I'm an entry-level employee, I would like to be an assistant manager, a manager, a director, a department head, make it clear how they get there. There's so many organizations you go into where it's just apparently the only way to get there is to be the son of the boss's golfing buddy or something like that. But if you make a clear ladder, hey, if you get this certification, if you serve on this board, if you do this, if you do that, you'll be considered for these roles. I think giving employees meaningful checkpoints in their career with you where they say, hey, I got a raise here because I did good. I got a promotion here because I checked off these boxes. Like giving people some sort of ladder to climb, I think is good. Take a firm look at your middle management and really ask how necessary some of those roles are. There's a lot of middle managers out there who don't have much to do, so they occupy themselves with microaggression, micromanagement, bullying, useless meetings that drain your resources. I had to tell you, God, middle managers without clear roles are a cancer on your business. They suck up their own salary. They suck up the working hours of your other employees, and they create drama. Because I'm telling you, very busy employees don't go around bullying each other. It's the ones who have too much time that tend to do the most bullying. And then don't hire people you don't trust. If you really don't trust someone, don't hire them. If you don't trust someone, don't bring them on, because if you bring in people you don't trust, you start treating your teammates like inmates. And that's always a recipe for disaster. The surveillance, the suspicion, the monitoring, the accusations, the performance improvement plans that aren't really about performance. They're just about keeping someone in line. If you don't trust someone, don't hire them.
Yeah.
And if you don't trust anyone, maybe go to therapy, because it sounds like you're the problem there.
Ryan, this has been amazing. Great conversation. We're so glad you joined us today.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Your Work Friends. You can find us over on yourworkfriends.com, Instagram, TikTok, and Francesca, where else can they find us?
Join us on Your Work Friends LinkedIn group or Your Work Friends on YouTube if you're a video person.
And listen, if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like to cover, you can email us over at friend@yourworkfriends.com. It's Vegas, it's anonymous, so share with us. And hey, if you like what you hear, share with a friend or two. Thanks, friends.
Bye, friends.